There's a terrifying number in the Centrelink Age Pension Assets Test. In my 40 years at the Department of Social Services, I've seen many Australian widows and widowers destroyed by it. It's a number few Aussie couples who sit across from me know about. Since I retired, I've been volunteering with the Financial Information Service, and I've seen how a lack of knowledge has cost thousands of grieving widows their entire pension. The number I'm talking about isn't a secret. In fact, it's published on the Services Australia website. You see, couples are assessed against one threshold while they are alive, and the surviving spouse is assessed against a very different threshold the minute their loved one dies. The gap between those two numbers is where the catch is. For some couples, the loss in pension is tiny. For others, it's their whole pension, gone, in a single fortnight. Let's start with Jane. Jane came to one of my morning sessions at a community centre in Mildura earlier this year. She's 76. Her husband, Michael, had died 8 months earlier, peacefully, after a long retirement. They'd been together for 50 years, married in 1976 at a small church wedding in Swan Hill. They had done everything right. The home in Mildura was paid off in 1994. They'd put aside savings carefully for decades. By the time Michael retired at 67, the couple's collective financial position was modest but secure. A paid-off house, around $460,000 in their account-based pensions combined, $40,000 in everyday savings, a small ute in Ron's name, and household possessions. While Michael was alive, their combined assessable assets totalled around $515,000. Slightly above the homeowner couple full pension threshold of $481,500. They were on a small part pension, around $1,700 a fortnight between them after the assets test reduction kicked in. They also had access to the pensioner concession card, the Commonwealth Seniors Health Card benefits, energy supplements and PBS script cap at $7.70. Michael sadly died in March. The funeral was small. The Centrelink bereavement payment came as expected. Jane was given the standard 14-week grace period, during which the couple payment continued in adjusted form, and was told she'd be reassessed once she'd finalised the estate paperwork. By April, the will had been administered. The home passed to Jane through joint tenancy survivorship, which I'll come back to in a moment because it's important. Michael's account-based pension was paid to Jane as the nominated beneficiary in the form of a death benefit pension. Their joint savings account had been transferred into her sole name. Jane was now the sole owner of the same assets that the couple held together a year earlier. The Centrelink reassessment letter arrived in May. Her pension had been cut down drastically. It fell by more than half. Jane had wrongly assumed that because her assets hadn't changed and her home was still her home, the pension would stay the same. She rang me through a referral from the local Anglican aged care service. By the time she got to my session, she'd been quietly using her savings for a few weeks to make up the difference. What had happened to Jane happens to thousands of Australian widows and widowers every year. The household's total assessable assets hadn't changed. What did change was the threshold those assets were being measured against. Jane's situation is one I see all the time, and the shock is always the same. A surviving spouse is grieving, dealing with paperwork, and a pension that's virtually disappeared, all at the same time. Before we continue, I should tell you I'm not a financial planner, a solicitor, or a licensed advisor. This video is general information based on my experience inside the system. For your situation, please speak with a solicitor in your state or a registered financial planner. Now, let's continue. And I'll walk you through the trap because once you see it, you'll understand why it catches so many people and what you can do before it catches you. Centrelink applies the assets test using two different sets of thresholds based on whether you're a couple or a single person. While the couple is alive, both members are assessed together. Their combined assets are measured against the couple threshold. The full pension homeowner couple threshold from March 20th, 2026 is $481,500. Below that, the couple receives the full pension. Above it, the pension reduces by $3 per fortnight per $1,000 of excess. The couple part pension cutoff, beyond which no pension is payable, is roughly $1,031,000. When a spouse dies, the surviving spouse is reassessed as a single person. The full pension single homeowner threshold is $321,500. The single part pension cutoff, beyond which no pension is payable at all, is approximately $722,000. Pause on those two numbers for a moment. The couple full pension threshold is $481,500. The single full pension threshold is $321,500. The gap between them, the couple cutoff, is $1,031,000. The single cutoff is $722,000. The gap there is $309,000. That is the trap. When a household goes from couple to single person, the threshold shifts downward by between $160,000 and $309,000, depending on whether you're at the full pension end or the cut-off end of the scale. But the assets in the household, in most cases, do not shift downward at all. The savings are still there, the super is still there, the car is still there. Only the threshold has moved. Jane's combined household assets while Michael was alive totaled $515,000. They were $33,500 above the couple full pension threshold, the $481,500. At $3 per fortnight per thousand, that was a pension reduction of about $100 per fortnight off the maximum couple rate. They were receiving roughly $1,700 a fortnight between them, or about $44,000 a year. The very day Michael died, Jane became a single pensioner with effectively the same assets now held entirely in her name. Around $515,000 of accessible assets, measured against the single full pension threshold of $321,500. She was now $193,500 above the single full pension threshold. At $3 per fortnight per thousand, her pension was reduced by $580 per fortnight off the maximum single rate. The maximum single rate from March 20, 2026 is approximately $1,149 a fortnight, including supplements. After the assets test reduction, Jane was receiving roughly $570 a fortnight, or about $14,800 a year. She had gone from a couple's pension worth around $44,000 a year to a single pension worth around $14,800. A reduction of close to $30,000 a year of household income. Not because Jane had more money than the couple had, because the threshold she was now being measured against was a different one. That is, the numerical cliff, and for couples whose combined assets sit closer to the part pension cutoff, the cliff is even steeper. Take a different couple, call them Jeff and Maureen, both 72, homeowners. Combined accessible assets of $980,000. They are well above the couple full pension threshold and receiving a small part pension of around $230 a fortnight between them, or roughly $6,000 a year. Modest, but it includes the concession card and other benefits. Jeff dies. Maureen inherits everything. The home passes by survivorship. The super passes as death benefit. The joint accounts transfer to her sole name. Her accessible assets are now $980,000 as a single homeowner. The single homeowner part pension cutoff is approximately $722,000. Maureen is now $258,000 above the single cutoff. She loses the pension entirely, not reduced, cancelled, gone. Along with it goes the pensioner concession card and every concession the card unlocked. The PBS script cap moves from $7.70 back to the full general rate. Her cancel rates concession disappears. Her energy supplement disappears. The bereavement payment that ran for 14 weeks ends, and she is now, on paper, a self-funded retiree who must support herself from assets that she and Jeff spent 50 years carefully saving. That's what the title of this video means. The asset test is a trap that costs the surviving spouse their entire pension after their loved one dies. Now, I'll show you where most couples make the situation worse by acting on assumption. When I describe this trap to a couple in a financial information service session, their response is usually the same. They look at each other and say, "We have wills. The assets go to the surviving spouse. What more can we do?" And they assume the strategy is about the will. But the will is part of the problem.
Most Aussie couples write what's called an I love you will.
Everything to my spouse, the home, the super, and savings. It's the standard wording at suburban legal centres, drafted thousands of times across the country. And for the couple's emotional intentions, it's perfect. For their Centrelink position after death, it's the worst possible structure. There are 3 smart things to do while both spouses are alive, not after. First, the structure of ownership of the family home. Most couples hold their home as joint tenants, which means the home passes automatically to the survivor by survivorship on the first death, before the will operates at all. The home itself remains exempt from the assets test for the survivor, which is fine. But the legal mechanism, joint tenancy, also colours how people think about the rest of their assets. The instinct that the other spouse automatically gets everything bleeds into the structure of bank accounts, of supernominations, of investment ownership. By the time the first death happens, every asset the couple owns is set up to pass to the survivor in their sole name, even though sole ownership is the most punishing position from the perspective of Centrelink single thresholds. Second, the Testamentary Trust. A well-drafted testamentary trust in the will of the first spouse to die allows their share of assets to pass into a trust rather than to the survivor outright. The surviving spouse can be a beneficiary of the trust. They can receive income from it. They can live in the property if the home is part of it. But they do not own the trust assets outright, and assets held by a well-structured testamentary trust are treated differently for assets test purposes. This isn't a means to hide assets from Centrelink. The trust structure is disclosed, but the accessible value of trust assets to the surviving spouse can be substantially lower than if the same assets had passed outright into the survivor's name. Let's be clear about what testamentary trusts do and don't do. They don't eliminate the assets test. The surviving spouse's own assets remain accessible. They don't protect assets from being assessed for residential aged care fees if the survivor later enters care. And there are aged care-specific rules that interact with trust structures. They do require a solicitor familiar with elder law and Centrelink rules to draft properly, and the cost is typically between $2,000 and $4,000 for a couple. A clause copied from the internet won't cut it. But for couples sitting close to the single-part pension cutoff, where the survivor's full pension entitlement is at stake, the testamentary trust is one of the most valuable tools in elder law. And sadly, most couples have never heard of it. The third is the order of the assets test reassessment. When a spouse dies, the surviving partner is assessed on assets held only in their own name. The home passes by survivorship and is exempt. The super may pass as a death benefit pension, which counts immediately. Joint accounts transfer over time. The assessment is not instant. There is a window, often several weeks, during which the survivor can take steps to restructure their financial position before the full single-rate assessment locks in. Funeral bond contributions to the relevant cap, prepaid funeral expenses, home improvements that fold into the exempt asset value of the family home, gifting within the $10,000 a year, $30,000 over 5 years allowance. None of these reverse the assets test cliff. All of them, used together, can soften the landing. But it must be done by someone who knows the window exists. However, most surviving spouses are dealing with emotional loss. The idea of financial restructuring is the very last thing on their mind. 3 things are worth doing this month if you're part of a couple receiving the age pension or close to receiving it. First, Calculate where your household sits against both thresholds. Total your combined assessable assets. Compare them to the couple full pension threshold of $481,500 and the couple cutoff of approximately $1,031,000. Then compare them to the single full pension threshold of $321,500 and the single cutoff of approximately $722,000. The numbers will tell you how far the cliff will fall when the first death happens. If you're well inside the single thresholds, the cliff is small and survivable. If you are sitting between the couple thresholds and above the single thresholds, the cliff is significant and worth planning for now. Second, look at your wills. If they are I love you wills that pass everything to the survivor, go see a solicitor who specializes in elder law and ask specifically about a testamentary trust structure for the first spouse to die. The conversation will take an hour. The drafting will take a few weeks. The cost will be in the low thousands. The protection for the survivor, if the couple is positioned near the single cutoff, can be $20,000 to $30,000 a year of preserved pension entitlement for the rest of the survivor's life. Third, before you do anything, book a free appointment with the Financial Information Service. They are not financial planners. They won't draft your will, but they will explain, with your specific situation in mind, what would happen to the surviving spouse's pension. The number to call to book is 132300. Ask for a Financial Information Service appointment, in person or by phone, whichever you prefer. Look after yourself. I'll see you next time.